perfect timing. We got Scott on today. Alim gets extended. So please welcome to the show our good friend, Mr. Scott Bischoff. Scott, how you doing?
I'm good, guys. How are you both?
Yeah, it's
doing great.
It's good to see you, Scott. I would love to get your thoughts on this. I mean, Alim just got extended literally minutes before the show. Your thoughts on the extension, 2 sacks against the Dallas Cowboys, and kind of the importance now of Alim, especially now without Aiden Hutchinson for the season.
Well, he's going to be one of the guys that has to step up for sure. He's whatever the extension was. With all those things, you got to see the numbers and whether how much is in year one and how much is in year whatever. I don't think it matters so much in some ways. He's a really, really, really good football player, a very important part of what they're doing. We're seeing a little bit of the DJ Reader effect with that freeing up McNeil to go get the quarterback the last couple of games, where early in the season there was no Reader. So he was, eating all of the double teams and all that stuff. It's interesting. Brad Holmes has done I'm going to call it even more. It's a miraculous job what he's done to take this team from what it was, I think of the end of the Patricia Quinn years, to turn it into what it is now. It's incredible. And obviously they want to pay their guys, which you should do. So it's well earned. He's played at a high level when he's been on the field. I would expect there to be more ceiling for him to get to. He's a really good run defender. He can get after the quarterback. Questions for me are what do they do with the Hutchinson injury, and how does that impact things going forward? And just because I have a question doesn't mean I have an answer. So they could go more 3-man front, which would be super interesting with a guy like Reader as a nose or as a shaded 1 tech, and players like McNeil as a 5 or a 4-eye kind of thing. You could have Onwuzurike in the same way, Pascal the same way. Then you could have you maybe walk up a linebacker and have that be sort of like your 3-man front with the 4-man surface. That's one way they could do it. But, I don't know that there's a great, there's not a piece of the puzzle that fits perfectly for what Aiden Hutchinson was for the Lions. He was literally the heart and soul of that team. So I think it's gonna be tough to replace him. I'm assuming that's where we were going to go. I should probably have.
No, you're right on track right now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, Scott, about this whole defensive line situation. I've been saying it for the last couple of days, and obviously now when Alim gets signed, he's like your number one guy on that defensive line, and he's going to probably have to be the captain and the heart and soul of this D line now. But I think it's unrealistic, at least me, and a lot of people might disagree with me. The Myles Garrett, the Max Crosby, that stuff might be tough. Like if it does happen, I'll be the first one to be like, okay, here we go. Like that's a big time move.
Well, if that happens, I'll be extended, if you know what I'm saying. But that's a whole different story that nobody will know about. Sorry.
No.
I agree. I think those things are unrealistic. I don't know that. I don't know why the Raiders would trade Crosby for any reason, even if it turns out to be 2 first-round picks and say like a third or whatever it is. I don't know why they would do that. He's 27. It just doesn't make any sense unless he were to approach them and tell them, "Hey, I just don't want to be here." Right. But I don't think that's in his makeup to do that kind of stuff. And I know they traded Adams today. Adams is older. He's at the end of his career. Crosby still has a long career ahead of him as an elite edge player. And those guys they are so hard to come by. So you don't flip those guys for picks, especially with specifically where the Lions are going to be picking, which you would think would be after, say, pick 25 for the next 2 years.
Right.
It's not like you're getting 2 top 10 picks. You're getting late first round guys for one of the best, edge setting guys who can really get after the quarterback that there is in the NFL. I don't know why the Raiders would do that. I don't even think that's remotely a possibility. And then Garrett, I know Cleveland's had a really strange couple seasons, bringing on Deshaun Watson and just having just not performing well. But Garrett's the same boat. Like, he's still young enough that he can make plays where you can play at a high level. I don't know why they would really want to move away from him. That one is I'm not so certain about that one. Like, that the situation in Cleveland has been bizarre since Deshaun Watson came on. So I don't know where Garrett is in that. So, I mean, speculating on it is just like, it's kind of pissing into the wind. Like, I don't really know that he's available anyway. So he'd be great. It'd be wonderful, right? But then, you're still missing Hutch, even if you bring Garrett on. You're just not replacing that guy. So, I mean, a couple of things to me come to mind, and one is, do we want to name some names and maybe try to pencil in who they might be looking at? Maybe we could do that, but that's such a speculative thing. I think Zadarius Smith is an older player. He might fit, but does he move the needle much? I don't know. I mean, he's okay. Azeez Ojulari is a defensive end for the Giants, and I think he might have been a nice fit for them, but Thibodeau just went to IR and he's starting for them. Their situation's weird. They're not playing real well. They're losing games. I think they're going to lose their starting left tackle, Andrew Thomas, to a foot injury. Sounds like a pretty bad foot injury. He's going to be out a while. So are they in tank mode kind of? And if so, it's almost like you're asking your head coach and the GM to sign off on them getting fired by losing, if that makes any sense, because they're not surviving another year where they dramatically underperform. And if Thibodeau's on IR and the starting edge player with him on IR is Ojulari, and then you trade that guy for like a 5th round pick to Detroit, what does that say? Right. So I'm not even sure that guy's a possibility. So, I mean, there are some names that are out there that would be intriguing and would be fine, but nobody is filling Hutchinson's shoes, and we shouldn't expect them to. But then the second part of that is this locker room it just feels like there's such a tight unit. There's such a good vibe in that room right now that maybe bringing somebody else, a bigger name player in, might not be the best idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, yeah.
Like, they're vibing. That team saw what happened to Hutchinson in early in that third quarter and proceeded to go on to, line up Skipper out as a receiver, which was hilarious, by the way, because the way the corner approached that was like, this dude's running a route on me and I better be ready. I thought it was so funny. Yeah. And then,
giving Panay the rock too, Scott. Giving Panay the rock a little bit.
Yeah, like, those aren't necessarily things you do after you feel like, the gut punch of what the Hutchinson injury was. They didn't go in the tank there. If anything, they embraced it more. I'm not saying they played harder, but they definitely did things that you wouldn't think they would be doing in the second half of a blowout win, where their dude is out for the year. So I think the team took what happened to Hutchinson much better than we as fans and the media has, just based on the way they looked and the way they performed late in that game. And I would expect that going forward is that their expectation is still the same. If that team expected to win the Super Bowl pre-Hutchinson injury, they do now too.
So, and to what you're saying though, Scott, and by the way, I do see what you're saying about the locker room. It's just interesting, and they brought in the Isaiah Thomas. No, not the 5'8" basketball player. Isaiah Thomas, the defensive end from the Browns, they drafted in the 7th round. But they got to bring in some depth. They did that, I guess. They traded for some depth. Well, I mean, I know you kind of said what you think will happen, but if you were in that position, I know you don't want to mess up the locker room, but you have 3 guys essentially that would have been in this rotation at some point out for the year: Davenport, Aiden, and John Kaminsky, who's been out. Like, how do you at least approach it at this point? Because Brad, and we talked about this yesterday, it has to make contractual sense. You don't want to have someone that's on under a long-term deal that can mess with extending guys. You need someone that fits the locker room. There, like Brad says, not everyone can be a Detroit Lion. I brought up a name yesterday, and I would like to hear your thoughts on it. Some guys, like you brought up Za'Darius, not that these guys can replace Hutch, but just some depth. What about like a Jadeveon Clowney or something like that? What are your thoughts on just bringing in some help? I know Dan said it on 97.1 today. They're just looking for a role player, someone to set the edge. Anyone come to mind when you hear Dan say something like that?
I mean, there are names, but again, are they available? I mean, their solution could be in-house. Like that, you could.
What about Houston? Do you think Houston could return to somewhat rookie year form, or are you out?
I don't know. His injury was deep in his ankle, that fibia fracture, and I just don't know that he's recovered any juice. To attack coming forward. I just think that his legs look a little bit lifeless at times, where there's just not a lot there. The injury he suffered was brutal, though, and it was a long recovery. So that's not the same injury as Hutchinson, by the way. So that's a different injury, but
right.
I don't know that it's Houston. I mean, it could be. He showed you that he does have pass rush chops. He can do those things. It's just his body might not be doing the things that it once was capable of doing. Mekhi Wingo could be an important part of this, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know what I think he looks pretty good when he's on the field, when he's playing. He does good stuff. You do have the makings of a pretty solid front four with Onwuzurike, Pascal, McNeil, and Reeder. Now, what you don't have there is you don't have a real bendy, rocket ship edge rusher who can get home super quick. You don't have that, but you do have the ability to stop the run like they have been and to play a very physical brand of football while squeezing the pocket. That's very different than harassing a quarterback and making him throw the ball way too soon. So, in a perfect world, you'd find somebody who you could get freed up to do those kind of things. I just don't know who that's going to be. My guess is it'll be more practice squad type, something that they saw in camp maybe, than going out to get somebody. But they do have 2 open roster spots, and I wouldn't put anything past them. I don't have great names to speculate on because.
Yeah, it's all
contract matters and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, I want to kind of take it back to the offseason coming up, just because you were one of the best draft minds that we know here on Crunch Time. And I just want to kind of pick your brain a little bit when it comes to these contracts that we see today and the Amon-Ra one and Jared Goff and all of these. And obviously, as an NFL GM, as you give out these contracts, it feels like maybe it not puts pressure, but it does kind of set something up to where you have to draft that much better. And as we go through that draft process, like when we were talking with you a lot through that draft process, we're talking about all these kind of hidden gems that Brad Holmes finds and that you can find and that we talk about with you. What does that look like kind of going into these drafts? Does that change as a GM like Brad Holmes? How much does that change his mindset of giving these contracts and also being like, okay, we have to look completely different going into this draft process now because we do have these big time contracts. Like now we have to replace starters consistently in those later rounds. Does that change a little bit?
I would imagine that for Brad Holmes, it doesn't change a thing. I don't think if Brad Holmes finds a player he loves who just happens to play Alim McNeill's position, I don't think he's going to erase him off the board simply because there's a player ahead of him. I think they'll find a way, right? Yeah. Obviously, they need an edge defender in this draft. I mean, it would be priority number 1 in this draft. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be in a position to get one. And it doesn't mean that somebody might not step in front of them. Like they needed an edge defender last year, too. But they traded up for Terry and Arnold, which I think looks like a very solid move to this point. Would I rather have Jared Verse right now and, Verse on the Lions? And even with the Hutchinson injury, yeah. But Arnold is going to be a really, really good football player. He's doing things that most rookies are not capable of doing. staying in phase and coverage and being in a really good place with his body. I know his hands have been a little grabby here and there. And there's been some ticky-tack calls and whatever you want to call them. But, he does need to do a better job of not pulling so much and not getting his hands involved like he was allowed to do in college. But, edge rusher is tough to come by, man. It just is. And where they're going to be drafting, I don't know. This doesn't look like a great class of edge rushers. The offensive line player, there's a bunch of O-line guys that look really good. There's a huge group of running backs who are really, really good. Everybody knows who Ashton Janty is. There's 2 receivers who are legit. The first one is Teta Iroa McMillan from Arizona. He's a dude. He'll be a top 10 pick. He's really, really good with the ball in the air. And then he's big. And he's got a big wingspan, catches everything, and then is athletic to run away from you. And then the other one's Missouri's Luther Burden, who, he's going to make home run hitting kind of plays. But from a home standpoint, I'm not sure that they're approaching it thinking, all right, we got a few of the O-line guys signed. It just never stops. You need more of those guys. Injuries happen, things happen. You need as good a depth as you can get. They've done a great job of getting to a point where they do have good depth, but they need better depth to handle a situation like the Hutchinson injury this week. Not that you could replace him, but you need somebody who fits your system, who can do something for you. So my guess is it's a good question because it's, you would think that some guys would think, and I know like Martin Mayhew did this stuff where it was, well, we got a tackle, don't have to think about that for a while. And he would just assume that whatever tackle he picked was going to work. And it doesn't always work that way. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, we do appreciate you for joining the show. And you guys can check Scott out on X. Obviously, the ad's right over there. @Bischoff_Scott. And check him out on Detroit Lions podcast and DetroitLionsPodcast.com. Scott, we'll talk to you very soon, my friend. Appreciate you for joining.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Appreciate you, Scott.
Hey, what's going on there? It's Jeff Iafrate. Appreciate you for finishing the video. You can check out one of the videos here suggested or show support by commenting, liking, and subscribing. And buy your merchandise, FisherCTSports.com.